Good afternoon or good morning for everybody joining us for today. We are going to get started here in just a second. Today's webinar is going to be focused on CCS 1000. And joining us today is AJ Peterson. I'm Preston Stevenson, Marketing Manager for North America. AJ will be covering a little bit of the CCS 1000. If some of you guys joined the presentation yesterday, it'll be a little bit of an overview there about the core details, but then we'll go actually deeper into the system on that. So we thank you all for taking a little time of your day to take a look at what we have to offer here. So for you guys that are new with us, AJ's been with Bosch since 2011, has quite a wide variety of background and knowledge here. Majorly focusing a lot in our training department. So whether it's RTS, Electro-Voice, our paging, mass notifications, and then application design support for our conferencing portfolio. So without spending any further additional time there, I'll hand it over to AJ.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Preston. All right, as Preston mentioned, we're going to look at CCS 1000 today. If anyone joined the webinar yesterday, there will be a quick kind of review. I won't spend too much time on the basic components, but for those that are new, I just wanted to go over the basic components of the system. And then we'll jump into the web browser and actually look at kind of the user experience and how that would work if you were an end user or an operator. So, compact yet versatile, as we discussed yesterday. This is our very easy out-of-the-box solution. I was thinking this morning almost, for those musicians out there that remember kind of the Fender PA in the box, I kind of almost think of CCS 1000 like that, conference system in a box, where I can pull this right out of the box, plug it in, turn it on, and it works. I don't use the term plug and play very lightly, if you know me. I don't actually like that term, but this truly is a plug and play system. So that is the market we're going for. Extremely simple setup, but extremely high quality and some really nice features at this price point. So as I said, really no training needed. We have front panel operation, but we also add the web browsers for kind of advanced features, or if you want to have a little bit more control. But we really are taking this out of the box. We are daisy chaining devices together, and we're turning it on, and we have a conference system. So another thing to make it simple is that we wanted to keep another step, or one less step to get you up and running, is that we have camera control, up to 6 cameras, free of charge, meaning you don't need any additional licensing, and I don't need to go online to license a system. Again, out of the box, I can hook up the supported cameras for this system and then have camera control and add that into my meeting. Internally with CURD, so we have 2 controllers. I'll talk more about that in a second. But on the CURD controller, we natively support up to 8 hours of internal digital recording at various bit rate and qualities of your choice, depending on, if I lower the bit rate quality, I can get more data and recording time. But if you need additional, or you need to export those files, obviously, I can throw a 128 gigabit stick and get up to 4,000 hours of recording right from that front panel. We're kind of pride ourselves on our feedback suppression. I always really like to demo this in person, that our loudspeakers and microphones are always live at all times. So we really do an excellent job. I see so many installs where they went with permanently installed microphones in a desk and permanently installed ceiling speakers, and then they need to go to a third-party DSP for feedback suppression. And it's a lot of parts. It's a lot of install. It's a lot of programming. And if an end user doesn't know how to program it, they're making a service call. We've done all of that for you. You don't need a third-party DSP. You can get very comfortable listening volumes without worrying about feedback and any other kind of third-party devices. So if you ever, I always say, since Infocom was canceled, if you haven't heard this and we get together at Infocom or some other trade show again, certainly come check it out and listen to the audio quality. So I kind of mentioned that, that the loudspeaker and microphone are active at the same time. And of course, that gives us the best intelligibility by all participants. I should also point out, we don't call this a PA. It's not a PA. It has audio in and out interface to go to a PA. It's really called a voice lift system. And what that means is we don't want it to sound like you're coming through a microphone and a booming PA. When you have this experience, it should sound and feel extremely natural. It should just sound that even though that person's 40 feet away, I can hear them in my loudspeaker kind of right in front of my face, and I hear them at a comfortable, natural volume. So I discussed a little bit about the web interface. We will go over that, but what we see, or we'll dive in a little bit more, but what we're getting there is obviously microphone control. I can do the camera assignments. That's where I would say seat 5 is camera 2, pre-position 1, for example. I can program who's a chairperson or who's a delegate. And also what we see a lot is that this can all be done wirelessly. We hook this up to a wireless router. I can now take my tablet and control this system wirelessly, kind of as you see in the picture there. So this is, if you're familiar with any of our conferencing products, you'll see this across the board, and it's kind of an industry standard thing that white means it's possible to speak. You know, my microphone is on, I'm working, it is possible for me to speak. Green would mean that you are in the queue or you are next to speak. And red obviously means that the microphone is live. And that's across all Bosch conferencing products. Another thing we're running into a lot with, again, all of our products, it is, you know, cost saving initiatives and going green. We have automatic power off, so you don't have to worry about most people are going to leave these systems on for years, and that's fine. Our system's just going to automatically turn off for you, so you don't have to worry about it. And it just prolongs the lifetime of the electronical components. Application-wise, we're seeing this in, we kind of call it small to medium. I mean, we'll talk about it more. It can get up to 245, which I would call a rather large meeting, but we're seeing this in town halls and business centers. Preston pointed it out yesterday, and I'm sure you're all adapting to our new environment, but we're actually kind of seeing a spike in requests for these systems due to social distancing, due to, you know, I just got a call and said we have a hall that normally fits 500 people, and now we can only seat 200 people or 250 people, and they need to be spaced. What do you have to kind of bring us all together where we can hear everyone and still keep that distance? And this is a great solution for that. And of course, again, when we go over the audio input and output, I can also conference this in to a teleconference or to a video conference or whatever, a telephone conference, you know, whatever third-party device you want. So we're kind of keeping our distance, but still bringing people together quickly and without a lot of programming. So if you look at the back of the device, that is kind of how we do that. We have not only floor, meaning the mix in and out of the system or a third-party device in on that XLR cable, but an excellent feature is those 4, what's actually called a cinch connector. We usually call them an RCA connector in North America, that I can take an individual microphone. So of 245 microphones, I could grab 4 of the main presenters or the chairman or whoever you would like and get an individual microphone feed at all times of their microphone. We see this most often used in courtrooms, where essentially it's a requirement. So if you are an integrator out there or an end user in a courtroom, this is an excellent solution for that. We take a look at the devices themselves. They're all configurable as a participant or a chairperson. And that's basically just 2 buttons on it. You can pop the buttons out. We give you a couple sets of chairperson buttons, and then you flip a dip switch. You can have multiple chairpersons, but it's just a dip switch, and then that person would have priority over the meeting and could override other individuals speaking. And then, of course, we do always like to point out, they do have headphones, right? A lot of people are, if we need it much louder or we might be hard of hearing, we can plug a headphone in and get much more volume out of that system if that is preferable to you. Microphones comes in a 12-inch and an 18-inch. They are fixed microphones, but those are the two devices. I always kind of laugh at the cell phone immunity thing. If you remember back when we had Blackberries, you'd kind of get that weird noise. Obviously, that would not happen, and it hasn't happened in years, but I do like to point that out. So our control system, this is the D, so this does not have, I need to move something on the screen, sorry. What we've done, we did this for kind of just giving you all options. If you just said, all I want is audio, and I need to hit a price point, I would pitch the CCS-D-CU. But if you need or you want a couple additional features, that CURD adds the internal recording, the feedback suppression, and the 4 individual outputs. So just giving you 2 price points based on exactly what you need to use. And again, I mentioned highly flexible. We can get up to 245 units with the extension power supplies. So from the front panel, other than the web browser, we made it extremely configurable from a front panel. So I don't even need to log into this if I don't want to. It does add a few additional features, but I don't have to. And what we've given you, of course, an on and off button. I have volume control, both a built-in loudspeaker, which is excellent, and I'll tell you why in a second, but volume control of the delegate devices and volume control of a built-in loudspeaker in the controller. We can access the microphone modes. I'll talk more about those when we dive into the GUI, and the number of open microphones up to 4 from the front panel. And then, of course, we have the recording options, basically starting and stopping recordings. And if I want an external USB stick, I can just pop that in right there. And then on the rear, power input, we do have a wired connection. If it is connected to a wireless router, I can do it wirelessly, but it's good to know we can have a hard connection as well. Further left is the 2 powered trunks, do roughly 40 discussion devices per trunk. More on that in a second. We have our audio ins and outs for interfacing with third-party gear, both in floor mixes, mix minus, insertion mode, PA mode, and then of course a balanced line level XLR input. And then on the far left, we have the 4 individual outputs and a micro USB. So if I did use internal recording, I can extract those recordings, or I could record directly onto a USB stick. So this is the extension power supply. So if I need more than 80, essentially, devices on one system, I daisy chain in. It's all daisy chained and comes with 2-meter pigtails. So we have extension cables, but everything comes with a 2-meter pigtail, and I can daisy chain all of these devices to get up to 240 units. Everything's a 1 RU standard 19-inch rack mounted, but also comes with feet. So a lot of people, if it's portable, I can just set this up right on the desk. And it's, in my opinion, I think it's a really attractive, sleek looking unit. I think it doesn't interfere cosmetically with anyone's office space. So I think that's worth pointing out. This is just showing a diagram how, if you said, what would it look like if I daisy chained a lot more units? It would look just like this. The controller has that trunk output to daisy chain another power supply and so forth. And then each additional power supply has 2 more trunks to get 80 devices. I do like to point out, I say 80 arbitrarily because it does matter on the cable length. So if you said, I want to do, 30 devices, but I need 25 meter extension cables because it might be a different room or a very large room, that would reduce the total amount of discussion devices on that trunk. So in the manual, this is just a snippet of it, but in the manual, it shows, hey, if you're going to have, 30 to 32 meter extension cables, instead of 40, we can have 34 devices on that trunk. So not that big of a deal, but something to keep in mind when deploying the system. Of course, it's mobile, so we have to have travel cases, and there's a couple of them. One holds the controller and 6 devices, microphones and cables, and then one is dedicated to 10 discussion devices, microphones and cables. We have a few accessories, the extension cables, as I mentioned. We have raw cable that you can terminate yourself if you have to pull through conduit or do some kind of custom install, or maybe put it in a floor box or a wall box. You can certainly do that, and we of course sell connectors for that. And then that's upper left is a cable locking clamp. So if we have several extension cables and I'm running the show, I would feel certainly better if I had those kind of locked together so someone didn't accidentally pull on them and disconnect those. All right, so that was kind of, if you were in yesterday's meeting, that was kind of a recap of yesterday's meeting. And then what I want to do now is take a look at a little bit further of how the web GUI looks and how it would operate if I logged in to the web-based GUI, either wired or wireless. I guess I'll take a pause here if there's any questions. This might be a good time. Let's take a quick pause.
Yeah, we do have one question, AJ. It says, what is the internal size of the storage for CCS 1000D for the controller? That number I do not have in my head, but I do know it records at 44.1 and at 64 kilobytes a second. As AJ said, we get 8 hours. And then if we go all the way up to the 256, it drops down to 2 hours for that. So we could calculate out of that and get the number for you.
Yeah.
But that's the only question so far. So if you guys have any other questions as we're moving through this, feel free to put them in the chat. So I'll hand it back over to you, AJ.
Perfect. Thanks, Preston. I was actually going to say same thing, that it depends based on what's nice is when you change. If you want a lower quality recording, it'll immediately populate and say, you have 9 hours left. And it shows you live very intuitively how much space or time you have left. So our web browser, we open up here, and I'm doing full screenshots of what this would look like. I'm using Google Chrome. It supports all the major web browser platforms. And I log in. I'm logged in as an admin. That's kind of our welcome login screen. And then you will go to this screen. Now, of this screen, there's a few. I'm not going to go over every little thing. I really do like the way we laid this out. I like how it is similar across the product families, and I like how intuitive it is. I always tell people who might call me and we give them a demo, or they're getting it for their first time, and I say, press all the buttons. You're not going to break anything. If you don't know much about the system, you can click through this menu, and it should very easily, intuitively, you will understand exactly what it's saying. So for that reason, these 4 devices, these 4 items, I'm just going to discuss. Power turns the system on and off. That is pretty straightforward. If you hit power, it would simply say, are you sure you want to turn the system off? Yes, no. Logging, as an end user, you're probably never going to use that. If we had some bizarre, unexplainable issue happen and you called us, we might ask you to send us your logs. It goes to a big, huge screen of everything that's happening, and there's 2 options: to clear the log or to export the log. So usually if I was commissioning or installing the system, I would get it up and running to where the customer's happy, and I'd clear their log. And then if they had some issue and we needed it, they could export that and email it to us for troubleshooting. But end users aren't going to be looking at that. System info, same thing. That would be us saying, what version of firmware are you on? And you could go to system info and it'd say, you have the CCS-CURD. It's on this firmware. It's just basic information. And log out obviously logs you out of this interface. Only one participant can be controlling it at one time unless I create additional logins. So you can create multiple logins and certain access. More diving in, our first one and probably most used is manage discussion. If you click on manage discussion, you'd go to this screen, and there's certain options here. So you might, if you've used this, you might know my waiting list. Normally I have a speaking list on the right and a waiting list on the left. I left that blank, and I'll tell you more in a second. This depends on how I prepare my discussion, but in manage discussion, I simply say, right now, no one is speaking. So if I clicked on the plus sign on speakers, it's going to go to a screen saying, well, in your system, you have 5 people. These are just my coworkers here. And that is who could speak, one or several, depending on how you set up the meeting. And who would you like to talk? This is if I'm an operator. If I'm pushing my microphone button, clearly this is happening automatically. But if I was truly an operator, it depends how structured you want your meeting to be. I mean, some people, I've seen it, will have no one can speak. Everyone has to request to speak, and the operator or chairman allows them to speak. That is completely up to the end user, and that's why I didn't have 50 screenshots showing every single scenario of it, because it really depends on how you want the system to work for you. But we do give you a lot of options there. So if I selected several people to speak, then they would go into the speaking list. So now I have 5 people in an open conversation because I decided I wanted 5 people in an open conversation. And then I could stop and remove them all. Or if I clicked on one of them, I could remove one of them, or 2 or 3 or 4. Or if I hit stop and remove all, it would say, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, of course I do. And then no one would be speaking. So that's just how you would manage the meeting once you have it set up. Hand in hand, and I could have almost went to prepare discussion first and then manage discussion, but the way manage discussion looks or how it operates is completely based on how you prepare the discussion. So if I click on prepare discussion, I go to this screen. And the reason, first off, if you're familiar with this, you'll notice again that you didn't see the waiting list in my previous slide. That's because I have it in override mode. That's the gray button on the top, and that grays out the waiting list. In override mode, simply if I say 5 people, I put 4 people can talk in override mode. So if a 5th person comes in, it kicks out the first person speaking. That is override mode. I will say, I like to talk about it, not very popular in North America, but we are a global company. It's almost shocking if you travel around the world how people conduct meetings differently, and we want to have those options for you. So very popular in other regions, not widely used in North America. I will say open mode, and if you've used this before, probably in North America, 99% of people are doing open mode. And that would say it's open mode. How many people would you like to talk? In my scenario, I have 4 people. So if 4 microphones, the first 4 microphones went on, they would be in an open discussion. If the 5th microphone hit their microphone button, they would turn green and they would go into the waiting list. Then when one of those 4 people turn their microphone off, that waiting person automatically goes live, and so forth. And then you can also, I know it's kind of small, if you look at the waiting list, I can say, how many people do you want in the waiting list? As far as open microphones, we go up to 25, kind of chaotic. Keeping in mind, if 25 people are speaking at once, you know, as you can imagine, it's almost noisy, but we wanted to give you that option. I can also have 25 people in the waiting list. And then on the very bottom, it's just priority. And it says, if I'm a chairman, what do you want to happen when you hit your priority button? Keeping in mind, I can have multiple chairmen, but do I want it to mute everyone, or do I simply want it to play an audible chime, or do I want it to completely turn their microphones off? So I can do a temporary mute while I speak and then they come back, or I can absolutely turn all their microphones off and require them to request to speak again. Again, giving you many scenarios for the system to work for you and how you want to use it. The other 2 modes, so open, most popular, override, not super popular in the US, voice mode. So voice activation, some people call it Vox. If you're familiar with it, it's great. It does what it's supposed to do. It puts a gate on all of the microphones, and when I speak and I overcome that threshold, that audible threshold, I will then be allowed to talk. very excellent for that reason. And we also like to say, could also be a problem for that reason. So if I had 70 microphones and I put it in Vox mode and someone starts typing on their keyboard loudly, that could open that gate. So it's not that, it's excellent application if you use it properly. If we see very large systems, I always try to recommend, go ahead and try it, but just keep in mind, if I'm over here having a side conversation with someone, that could open that microphone. So just be aware of that. Push to talk, I like to just call it momentary. That simply means if I want to speak, it goes to the same as how many microphones can be open and waiting list. But if I want to speak, I would press and hold my microphone. And when I let go, it mutes my microphone. Where in open mode, it's push to talk, push to mute. I always kind of say the push to talk is to guarantee no one leaves their microphone open and walks away or goes on to something else or has a sidebar conversation. So again, lots of options to suit how you want to run your meeting. The other one we would see used all the time, I guess, if you have the CURD, is the Manage Record button. And that looks like this. I love it. I mean, you can't screw this up. It's extremely easy. You'll see in the upper right, it says I have 5 hours and 19 minutes left. So it would constantly, it doesn't say, you have 2 gigs left. It just gives you time, because we thought that was a little easier for end users because, what's 2 gigs of recording mean to someone who may not be super familiar with that, but I definitely understand 5 hours and 19 minutes left. I did 2 kind of test recordings there, and it stores them right there. This is the internal recorder, and I can delete them. I could have several of them, 100 of them, whatever I want. And what I love the most, I had mentioned that the control unit has a loudspeaker in it. So if you look on the playback in the upper left, it says pre-listen on control unit. That gives me the option to pre-listen to any of these recordings. If maybe I'm an operator that's not in the discussion and I'm sitting by the control unit because I'm making changes on the fly, I could pre-listen to something and not interrupt an entire meeting to know I have the right clip or the right portion of that clip, that then maybe the chairman says, let's play back that clip from the last meeting. And I could pre-monitor that, then click over to playback to floor and play that back on everyone's device. I think that was really smart, and it's very simple to use, and it does get used a lot. I'm a fan of it. I think we did that really well. So system settings, if we click into system settings, we get another larger screen. This is essentially where I'm configuring, if you will. It is plug and play, but there's a couple things I can configure. I'm going to go to the most popular ones that I think need a deeper look, and then I'll kind of recap the ones that are a little more self-explanatory in the interest of time. So audio, I love what we did here. This is our audio I/O. You'll see we have system audio. So I have a PA output. I have a loudspeaker output. So PA would be the line, the floor output. Loudspeaker would be the loudspeaker volume of the discussion devices. And then master volume is the mix of those 2 up and down. Line input and output. You'll see I have 2 in, 2 out. I can do an XLR microphone there on the back. That's for an ambient microphone if I'd like. And kind of across the board on Bosch, input output 2 has modes, routing options, and is dedicated for most popular a mix minus. If I'm integrating a video conference or telco or something like that from some other third-party device, another room, WebEx meeting, we could have one whole entire room be encoded into a WebEx meeting. So one person on WebEx is essentially a room of people talking to another room of people. And I would go in and out of 2. I have volume or gain control, and then I'd put that in mix minus. We also have recording mode and insertion mode. Recording is just going to be the mix out, essentially. And then insertion mode would be if I did want, for some reason, to insert a third-party DSP. And I said, oh, this whole system is so you don't have to buy a third-party DSP. That is absolutely correct. But what we see a lot of people doing, and with our new, if you checked out any of the MXE new DSP that we just released, is I can take an insertion of this system and get it to a third-party DSP and convert it to Dante, and now my entire mix is a Dante feed, and I can cross-patch that to any other device, either Bosch or third-party, that's using Dante. And now I could have several rooms, and I can do room combining via Dante. So that is extremely powerful to have that. This system is digital and has analog. There's not a Dante chip in this system, but obviously if you go to our DSP or anyone's, we'd like it if you used ours, but anyone's would do it, you can convert this to Dante, and then it gets you in that Dante realm to kind of patch to anything. Line outputs on the right, I also love this. These are our 4 individual outputs. So actually one single person's microphone as an output. And then you'll see just below it, I kind of tried to screenshot it so you can see, on the left, I put line output 3 is AJ Peterson, my microphone. And then in the line output 4, I showed that drop-down menu. So I just click a drop-down, and it'll list everyone that is in your meeting. And then you could say, I want their microphone individual feed. And then for 3 and 4, we just left them blank. Below that is our natural feedback suppression. You can turn it off. Pretty much always used on natural. And then we do have a maximum. I don't really run into scenarios. I feel like if I have to use maximum feedback suppression, someone has done something wrong. I mean, if we run this to a PA that has ceiling speakers 5 feet over the discussion devices that are, 90 decibels, you'd kind of ask, is this a very good acoustical design? What we see the most is that we have our discussion device, and then the PA feeds ceiling speakers to listening areas. And that all works great. And we've seen it where they're above it, but obviously feedback suppression is not magic. If you design a very poor system, you could get it to feedback and you could use maximum, but pretty much all the ones I did, natural sounds excellent. It works very well, and we're proud of that. And then we just have on the very bottom, you can attenuate headphones when someone is speaking. That is a preference, and you can mute a speaker if the microphone is on, just as a preference. So, do you want to chime in, Preston? I saw you came to life there.
Yeah, there's a question that came in here, so I think it's probably a good time to answer that one. It was talking about with the recording, is recording in the internal or external USB of that? Is it all the mics, active mics, or is it a multi-channel recording?
It would be all of the microphones, but I could also record in independent and floor. So you could do an independent mic and floor, or all of them, or if you, for the internal one, yes.
Yeah, that's correct, right? And what I've seen, right, from use case applications of that, we've had a lot of success with that in courtroom applications, right, where you want a recording of everything that's going on, but you might want an individual recording of the judge or somebody like that, right? That's specified, and that's recorded as a separate track. So.
Yep.
And then also, can I change the recording names? And if so, how is that done?
Meaning where I put AJ Peterson, meaning the seat name?
I think they're referring to the file name of the recording.
I haven't done that, Preston. Can you?
Yeah, no, I that would not. What it does do is actually it timestamps, right? Because you don't know, right? When you hit start, whether you're just pressing it from the front panel, we make it really simple for that, right? Anybody can walk in and plug in a stick and hit record with that. But with those timestamps, right? And once they're saved, anybody can go into that file and then do a rename. So you're not tied to what it is, right? It's just like, if I have a Word document and it's unentitled document when I start, with a date and time, I can go in and change it, to whatever I want that to say.
That's what I thought. I just thought I wanted to include you.
Thanks.
Anything else?
That's it for now, so we'll keep going.
All right, thanks. Great, so that is our audio page. And thanks for the questions, all good questions there. So next, I want to touch on cameras. Again, out of the box, camera control. And we support, I did the slide yesterday, I don't have it in this exact presentation. In short, it's OnVIF cameras by Bosch and Lumens. It's Sony CGI command cameras and Panasonic CGI command cameras that will be natively supported, meaning our system will auto detect them and will control them to pan, tilt, zoom, 2 pre-positions in that system. And then if you had multiple cameras, it would be TV1 matrix switches or Kramer switches. So, and again, natively controlled. So if I had a TV1 switcher and 4 cameras, I would put that information in there and it would know to tell that switcher to go to camera 3, pre-position 5 if Preston was talking, for example. So if I click on cameras, that screen looks like this. And you'll see up top, in this scenario, it's auto-populated 2 Bosch cameras. It knows what cameras they are. I did not have a switcher hooked up, but it's saying at the top, if I had an SDI switcher, I would simply put a supported SDI switcher, I would simply put its IP address there and then tell the camera that first HD conference dome is input 1 and the second one is input 2, and it would know and tell it to switch between those. Then overview camera, it's just obviously if no one is speaking, it usually does a room shot. So you're going to say, what's the overview camera and what pre-position is that camera? And then more on that in a second. So that's just the camera setup. Then hand in hand with that is seats. These are really the 2 kind of big things as far, I mean, I don't even know if I'd call it programming as far as I would just say, if you want to set up cameras, you'd kind of have to just say, which one am I using? What's the IP address of my switcher? And what's my overview pre-position? And then if I go to seats, this is where I got those names. So if I just connect system, it's going to say seat 1, seat 2, seat 3. You can leave it like that. That's fine. Let's say it's different people every single day. We might sit wherever you want, open seating. I'd just leave them as seat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you can certainly put people's names in there. Mode would be if they're a chairman or not. Do they have priority or not? If you want a camera to detect them, that camera list auto-populates in that drop-down, and then you'd say what pre-position there are. So as far as I'm concerned, the only thing you really have to program, and you just do it once, unless it's a mobile setup, is the camera pre-position. So if I set up a little horseshoe conferencing with 10 people, I would have to log into that camera and say, pre-position 1 is Preston, pre-position 2 is Chris, pre-position 3 is Ryan, and then tell this system where they're sitting. If you have assigned seating and it's an install, I would do that one time. If I'm a rental person or I'm mobile, you would have to do that each setup. But other than that, it's going to be a plug it in and it will pass audio system. So I don't dive in too far to these. Just again, I wanted to keep this one around 45 minutes and and open for Q&A. But users is simply if I want multiple users. And you go to a user screen and it says, what's your name, what's your password, and what access do they have? So I can lock them out from other features. If I wanted multiple people able to control, just manage microphones or manage cameras and nothing else, I can do that there. Network and general settings, again, if you want to set it to a static IP or leave it on DHCP, that's about what you're doing here. And then it's general info, just what the firmware is, what, you know, if you go to static, you'd set it up once and leave it alone. If you're on DHCP, set it, just leave it. So that's that. Recorder screen is essentially what quality do you want? It just goes what, you know, Preston said, it's 44.1K. If you lower that way down to a lower, compression rate, you can get more time out of it. Most people are leaving that at default and using a USB stick. Because what's a 128 gig USB stick? Like $20. So that's what we're seeing is most people are doing that. If 5 hours is all you need, it sounds great at the default, but like you said, you can get up to 256K, which is probably overkill for a conference call that might be streamed online, but you can do it, and then you're down to roughly 2 hours of audio, so you might want to get that USB stick. In time, I hope we all know that. You can say what time zone you're in and what the date is, and it recognizes all global time zones. And upgrading is simply upgrading unit firmware. For the most part, you're not really dealing with that out of the box. It comes with current firmware, and it should be all set. So in short, that's kind of a walkthrough of the system pretty much in its entirety. Other than programming the cameras, we pretty much covered everything CCS. So I will, for one last time, open it up to any general comments or questions. And we certainly thank you for your time today.
Perfect. And we do have 2 questions, AJ, here. And I think one of them we covered. Which SDI switchers are compatible?
You want me to do that? TV1. There's a TV1. I don't have the exact model memorized, but they have a 6-camera one, a 4-camera one, and an 8-camera one. And then the TV1 Choreo Matrix, which is way overkill for the system because it can do hundreds of cameras. And then a Kramer, help me out, it's an MV6.
V6, yeah.
Kramer MV6. By all means, is there any contact on here? I have like a quick email. That's a very common question. I'm sorry, I should have put that slide in here. Should I just open that other slide, Preston, and show?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, if you want to, that's fine. If you want to switch over to that. And then while you do that, there is another question as far as what do you do for energy efficiency? And while you're opening that, I'll answer that one. What we do have is what we can activate in the system is an automatic standby mode. So what that does, if there is no activity on the microphone, so if no microphone is activated for 2 hours, the system itself will actually go into a soft standby so that you can wake the system up relatively easily out of that. So that's what we do from that perspective.
Great. Thanks. And here we would again, should have just threw this in my presentation. So ONVIF, Lumens, and Bosch, and a few models that we support. Sony CGI commands, and then several models that we support for, again, camera control. And Panasonic CGI commands, and then the several models that they support. And then to answer this specific question for switchers, Kramer MV6 is up to 6. And this is kind of a global slide, so all Bosch, this applies to all Bosch conferencing products. The TV1 Choreo Matrix can support hundreds, so yes, it would work, but it is only 6 for CCS 1000, and that would be way overkill for a CCS system. And then the TV1s gives us an 8-camera and a 4-camera. Again, CCS limits at 6, so even if you had an 8, it would only handle 6. But or I'm sorry, that's for the TV1 is for Dicentis only. It does say that right there. So pretty much what we're seeing is Kramer MV6, and you can have all 6 cameras. And we do lots of systems. Keep in mind, if you have 1 camera, you obviously don't need a switcher, and you can just put it on the network and use its HDSDI output.
Perfect. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. That email address, we'll make sure it gets out to you in the wrap-up email. But it's presales.support@us.bosch.com. Or reach out to your local Bosch representative as well, and they can get in touch with us or filter any questions that might come up afterwards. And then also, one thing I do want to point out for conferencing as well is we do have demo systems that we ship out. So if you have any customers that want to try something out or start looking at something, we do have those available. So again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon.